Hello, welcome to Product Huddle. I'm Anna and this is Jeff. So this is 12th month, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 12. Once a month, 12 months, which means we're officially been doing this for a year. Most podcasts die around episode 3, usually right after the host buys a good mic. We bought a good mic, I think, on episode 2, and we are still kicking. So I feel like we beaten something, No confetti though, no confetti. The correct way to celebrate a year of a product podcast is to spend it arguing about somebody's roadmap. So, Jeff, you've been chewing on something.
Yeah, but first, 10%, less than 10% of the podcasts make it this far. And so, and I couldn't have done it without a great partner like you. And so I wouldn't have wanted to do it without a great partner like you. So, but yeah, I wrote about this on LinkedIn a couple of days ago. Everybody is starting to add AI to their roadmap now. But the problem is that customers are just quietly going around it. I found this survey. Gartner surveyed over 3,000 people, and they were 3 times more likely to reach for a third-party AI tool than the one their own vendor built for them. Company chatbot usage, for example, has been flat since 2022. So here's the question that I keep chewing on. If no customer's asking for it, why does it keep showing up on the roadmap? And I think it goes something like this. Someone in the C-suite sees a competitor's demo, or maybe a board member asks, "What's our AI story?" And someone forwards a trend report, and suddenly there's a new priority on the roadmap with no customer named, no ticket surfaced, no interview produced. It just shows up on the roadmap. So I don't know, Anna, have you seen anything like this? If you did, what did it look like?
I've got a scar. I think anyone working as a product manager now has a scar or a story regarding that. I would be really, weirded out if nobody has a story like this. So I would say that mine was as invite in the calendar with no agenda, which is never a good sign, right? And 40 minutes later, we had a new Q3 priority called A-powered insight with the capital A, P, and I. So, and I had to ask in the meeting, what's the insight? Like genuinely, I just wanted like a definition, what we are talking about. So we are all on the same page, right? And nobody could name one, but everybody could feel one. So that's a very specific kind of meeting. And I want to state again, because if anybody listened to any podcast that we did so far knows that I'm all for AI. I'm not against. I'm always for optimizing, for being faster, correct, for, something that will help out users and the companies and for, growth. But to make it just because that's trendy, that could be very expensive. So I'm always, looking for data, and I really want to talk this through and make it right. So basically that is my story. It got shipped, but at what cost?
Yeah, I mean, people are going to call me old school. I can live with that, but I don't think that there should be products or features on the roadmap that are just there because of some executive narrative. I mean, I want to have things on the roadmap that are actually solving a customer problem. And I can think of, I'm going to name names here, products that I use that have incorporated AI into it, and I don't use the AI features. Google is always wanting to write my email for me. LinkedIn is wanting to write my LinkedIn posts. Canva is wanting to help me. I don't use any of those. I end up taking what I want to do to Claude or sometimes Gemini or ChatGPT, generating it there and cutting and pasting or using what comes out of the tool that I use and that I trust. I don't know, Anna, have you had any experience with just kind of ignoring AI tools and products that you use and pay for?
Well, I think there are some tools that maybe we're not even aware that they are built-in AI, such as, autocorrect and some video tools, for example, spam filtering and stuff like that. But also I have been using Copilot, for example, and Cursor. So I would say I am using it, but I would reflect on, we should check on data, for example, how many AI built tools in general are used, because I don't think I can say we are not the target audience. It depends on the product, obviously, but I don't think we are the representatives in general. I think, people like you and me are investigating or looking for new tools and new products anyways, having built AI or not. So maybe, there should be some other question behind it, like for some other target audience. Or maybe our listeners can tell us like more about like what they have been using and how much is that helping them.
So I'm gonna. I have a question about that. Because we're product people and because we're looking at all these tools, are we more likely to adopt a tool to leverage a bit of an AI feature set than the average user who is, not as either tech savvy or tech curious and just is focused on outcomes? That's the whole idea that a lot of people are just using ChatGPT like they would use Google and not necessarily using it in maybe the more robust ways that you using Cursor or some of the other tools have experience with.
I would say yes, but because the original question is, would we adopt faster or more probable to adopt? I would say yes, but for maybe shorter period, because I think of product people as the detectives. We really want to get into it and we want to, push the boundaries of a product to see what it can do. So we can then put it in a box and say it can do this and this and this, and I'm happy with this, but this is not good. I would change it. No, I think we're always analyzing, even probably in our private lives. So I would say that it's more likely for us to adopt any tool that is of concern of us or something that we would use either as professionals or private people, right? But we would maybe, get a tool for the first month and then dig into it. And then if we don't like it enough, so it could help us out in our life in that month, we would probably just, ignore it. But if it really would help us out and we are satisfied enough with the price and everything, we would probably incorporate it in our lives for then 3 months or 6 months and then review again. So maybe that's what I would do just. But I think we have all this kind of approach that we would adopt it faster because we are interested. We are, we want to know.
Yeah, I think
Curious.
If you were, yes, curious is the word. Product people tend to be, I think, more curious because we're solving problems. We're looking for potential solutions. We're always mindful of potentially a new workflow or a new way to do something that shaves off some minutes or improves the process, the speed, lowers the costs, those types of things. I mean, I think that's natural for product people. So have you had any experience with a feature just landing on the roadmap that a customer didn't ask for? When that happens, where does it usually come from?
I think that happened a lot of times in my work experience, not necessarily in my team, sometimes I was just part of another team and just looking at the company's roadmap and I see this is not what customer wants or user want. But my approach is not to build everything that customer wants and users want. So when I say my approach is to focus on users, I don't mean necessarily build what they want, because that's not always overlapping with the goal of the company, or even not in the nearest direction, or not in any type of direction that company or that product wants to go in the future, or that we already have the data that the trends or the affinities of the users will not go. So that's not useful for us to start building now. There's no budget for it. And in the end, we have to admit it, but users do not know what they want always. And even if they communicate that doesn't mean they will use it. And if you want to monetize that feature, they would maybe not want to pay for it. So that's not useful for you to build it and then try to, sell it, and they will not give you any money. So they would maybe use it, but for free or something like that. So there are many options or many reasons, I would say, why not to build something that users want and build something that it seems like users do not want at this point, but they will use it anyways and they will pay for it anyways. However, I don't think you're thinking on those cases. You're thinking in the cases where we have no proof that this will work out. Basically, that's an idea from very higher up person, whoever that is, and this decision has already been made. So that's going to be built. And with that said, I think we all need to admit that, as always, negotiation started, right? So you can't negotiate that's not going to happen, because that will happen. It's only, I think, a matter of who is going to ship that. And I think, even though it doesn't seem like a good idea, I would be the one for it, because I would really want to know, for example, working closely with that executive, like, what's the real idea behind it? Because sometimes we could judge too prematurely and say this is not a good idea. And I'm not saying you should now find the reasons why you should ship it, but maybe there is something to it. And I truly believe that every good product manager is capable enough to use this opportunity to build something useful. So even the idea is maybe not something that you're sold for in the beginning, but you could use this in many ways for your leverage, for your team's leverage, for company's leverage, and for the users in the end. So, and that could be like an opportunity. What is your experience with this?
Well, I think there's a couple of paths we can go down here. I've definitely experienced the situation where a senior executive makes a recommendation that somehow ends up on the roadmap. And sometimes it's okay. Sometimes they just don't really have a good grasp of what the product is, what the problem is that you're trying to solve with the product, and they really are trying to make the product into something other than what it's intended to be. And I've definitely had those types of experiences and have had to try and push back on those. I think there's another option that's coming online as people do more and more coding with AI, vibe coding and such. And that is because it makes things easier, you end up with the possibility of feature bloat. And you end up with adding a bunch of features to a product that nobody's really asking for, but it's easy to build them. So let's go ahead and build them. And then you end up with these confusing menu structures. I mean, think about Google, for example. For the most part, Google's product is still just a search box. It's brain dead simple. And that's because simplicity is part of what they do. But what happens if we start to add features is that our menus get congested with a bunch of things that have very little usage that nobody's really asked for, and that customers can't find their path to the things that they're actually wanting to do with your product. So I think it's important to keep that focus on what are we trying to solve here, and what are we trying to solve here, and make sure that the things that we're adding to the roadmap actually are on the path of solving that, and not just because somebody thought it was a good idea or somebody thought it was easy to do.
Exactly. Yes. And while you were talking, I remembered to mention that I would say the usage of AI in companies is getting a bit all over the place. Like, it's very useful. You just need to know where and when to use it. And yes, it's good that you could build faster, but could we then use it for testing faster or maybe even fail faster? So then we know we get the data, but we don't have to necessarily build up features and blow them up and have like tons of features, like you said, to make noise. Let's not make noise. Let's test it. Let's shorten that period, play with it. And this could really be very, very beneficial for a lot of companies who are not open to testing because it takes a lot of time, a lot of resources, planning, and so on. Makes sense? Yes. But with this, we can shorten that time and actually build stuff that we want. We just need to test it more, and you could and do it faster with AI. So let's do it this way. So maybe as with everything else, it just needs time, and people with proper visions and enough experience to guide those companies, how to do it with actually, sticking to a budget and making most out of this technology.
So yeah, let's go back to that other scenario where it's an executive who's kind of pushing for features that aren't on the roadmap, it is especially the AI features. In the case of AI, is this really the hype is moving faster than the evidence that people need it? Or maybe is there something more personal going on with that executive who's pushing it? I guess I'm like, is this hype or is this control or is it some of both?
I think it's so hard to answer that because probably in many cases there's like a mix of it, maybe even something that we didn't think of at this point. I really have to think about some examples that happened in my experience to really say what I thought about that particular situation. But I would then kind of reflect on, which is maybe a deeper topic, is that there are also people, right? They feel pressured. They feel like this will maybe not even get him something out of it. Is it a bonus power play? I don't want to get into that, but maybe he really thinks, or she, that this will bring company that edge over the competitor. They know some kind of information that we do not get. Unfortunately, it could be very useful. I know that's also a trust issue, but please, executives, if you're working with product people that you can trust, share the information. That could be very useful for them making the decisions or proposals and suggestions, and the communication would be better. But to get on to the topic is, I think it's just this primal reaction to what's going on, and the business world is getting more and more, I think, confusing for someone. At least I think I can say this for people who are not that experienced in development or AI in general. So they got very confused on what would be the best next step for them or the company or the product. That's pretty much it. I really would love to think of that in that empathetic way, but I think we would all be lying to say it's not hype. We are talking about AI bubble since it started, so hype is definitely part of it, but we can't, I think, put that kind of decision in that column. Or is it personal? That's really something that we can't generalize, I would say. But is it a mix? In most cases, probably yes. I don't know. What's your opinion on this?
Yeah, I guess I've been through a number of these cycles. I saw the mobile first cycle. I saw the cloud first cycle. I saw, the Web3 first cycle. And now we're in the AI first cycle, where it's everything has to be seen with that filter. So I feel like there is a strong amount of hype, and that over time, people will calm down and will use the tools to do the things that they're supposed to do instead of, back in the Web3 blockchain days, it was like we were trying to force fit it into places didn't really map very cleanly to, in order to be able to say to leadership, to investors, we're doing the thing with blockchain, we're doing the thing, and now we're doing that same thing with AI. So I think it's definitely, there's a definite piece of hype, but I also, to your point about people being people and people having egos, there's a certain amount of we're going to do this because I'm the boss and I think it's a good idea. And that's, and I've been through those situations before. And sometimes I've been able to impact those situations, and sometimes I've just had to go along for the ride. So, yeah.
I agree. I had many of those experiences, so I can definitely sympathize with that and have my experience with that. But I have to say that over time, it either I changed or like people who I work changed. Definitely the people that I work with now are nowhere near that. They really do make great rational decisions and they're trying to, make the most out of it. So maybe this is like an exception. Or maybe, also people are getting educated in companies. So, or I'm just lucky. I don't know. Maybe it's a mix of all three. But I would say that the situation is improving and that people also have experiences. As you said, this is not the first hype. So they also learn that when something like this happens, they should be a bit cautious and skeptic and filter more and make more rational decisions. So I would say that in general, the situation is improving, but you will always stumble upon people who are just forcing things into a roadmap. And yeah, I think that's like a responsibility of the company at that point to really decide if that person is bringing value or there's like a decision to be made in order. So of course you want to be the most profitable. That is the point, but are those kind of decisions going to bring you to that? You should look at the data. As I said, look at the data.
Yeah, but there are some bigger issues, I think, in here. When you ship a feature that nobody's asked for, things break. There's costs that don't show up in the sprint review. For example, you used the word trust a little earlier. If I have to ask my team to build features that nobody's asking for because a senior leader in the organization thinks it's a good idea, I'm burning trust with that team. They want to work on things that matter. They want to build things that are going to bring value. So you're burning the trust of you're adding costs into the business from developing things that nobody's asking for. And you're also deprioritizing things that probably customers did ask for, right? Because it's not like you're all of a sudden getting more resources to do the things that need to get done. It's this thing is leapfrogged over other things that were on the roadmap to get done now. So the things that would actually drive more revenue become deprioritized in order to build things that nobody's asking for. You can get away with it if the features are small, light lifts, if you're not doing it on a consistent basis. But if you're consistently deprioritizing the real customer features to build things that nobody's asking for, you're on the fast path to not having much of a business anymore. If everybody that's working at the company needs to understand that without customers, you don't have a business, you don't have a paycheck. And so at some point, you need to be building things that are valued by the customer, that they're willing to give you a credit card for, that they're willing to cut you a check for. And if you're not building things that they're willing to cut you a check for, there's only so much investor money that you can burn through before you're just done.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that kind of scenario is pretty much closest to the worst one. So you're building features that nobody wants, that will probably not bring you any money, and your team hates you for it. So I don't really see at this point like the silver lining if all of this is true. But I would say that in every situation, I am trying to make most out of it. So I would probably really sit down and find a way to do it. On top of my head, I would say I would just try to spin this as a test and see what will come out of it and heavily monitor it and bring out data at every occasion that I can to everyone. So this could be a lesson. And then maybe we can reorganize ourselves in a way how to make decisions. Because if this proves to be unsuccessful, as we already anticipate from everything that you said, then let this be a lesson, and then this will be cheap. If we don't learn, it's always expensive. So then you, I guess, need to accept that you're in a company that does that, and it's your decision. Will you stay or try to fight it? But to be honest, I don't think this is that rare. But I would say it's very rare for a company to build everything but what users want. That I have never heard of it. Because maybe those companies are broke now, I'm not sure. But yeah, I would then again remind ourselves that not everything that users want will need and use or pay for it. So we need to have a disclaimer for that. But in the situation where it's just like some kind of stubborn idea from someone that thinks that have a great idea, and it's always like that, and you always make that kind of decisions, and all very needy features, which I say, like, for me, prioritized feature is not just what users want, but what we could gain most out of it as a company as well. Sometimes that's a security feature. It's not something that a user will even see like in a tangible way. That doesn't mean you can't market it or that you can't talk about it or use it for your advantage, for your brand, but it is not as attractive as even sales would love that it is, or even users. So I don't know, what's your take?
I guess I'm trying to figure out what the real impacts are of building something because leadership asks for it. Does it cost you something with your engineers? I think it does. Have you ever been in the situation where you've had to do something where kind of an executive strong arm something onto the roadmap and the team lost faith because of it?
I think I was close in a few situations, but I don't think they actually lost faith. However, I have to say that was not on many occasions. So I would say, like I said, for me, it seems very strange that becomes like a modus operandi for an entire company or a product, that always it gets reprioritized, a feature that's not for the users or useful in any way. I don't know if you had that kind of experiences. And if you did, like, how did you mitigate it, basically?
I think it depends on, and maybe one of the points here is inexperienced or junior level PMs are going to have this happen to them more often because they don't necessarily have the organizational stature, the organizational respect, the negotiation skills to be able to push back with some evidence. To be able to bring, like you said, bring the data forward. Does pushback with evidence actually work, or is that a thing that sounds good? In my past, I've been able to sometimes, not always, push back on leadership by bringing hard data, or better, asking them if they have any evidence for why we should prioritize this work over the work that we're doing. One of the most important things that a product manager can do is to protect the work that's getting done. Because if you're constantly moving from shiny object to shiny object and working on distractions, you end up stranding a lot of investment because there's things that don't get finished or get partially finished, but then we drop it to move to the next thing. So you end up stranding investment, you end up with half-built features, and you end up back in the situation where you're building things that don't drive real customer value. And so I don't know, have you been successful with bringing data or asking people to push back with some evidence?
Yes, I actually was. And I would say in many occasions, but I would say this also to kind of emphasize that I totally agree with you. And the last thing that you said, jumping from shiny object to shiny object is a very bad strategy, no matter if you're a startup or like a huge company that is on the market for years. I am really against feature hopping. What I definitely would use and would recommend is be faster with testing, be faster with making decisions to be ready to fail, to know what to build, yes, but do not hop on every 3 months on another feature that has no proof it's gonna bring life, no investment, no return, anything. So data for me is like a holy grail. I really love to use it, not just for my decision making, but also for decision makers and presenting to them. I think it's very important to know your data as a product manager. But, and I'm sure you had some experiences with this as well, there is sometimes that's not always enough to bring data. There are people who are not making decisions according to data. And I would say that is a real challenge when they are not relying on that and they do not find your argument as correct just because you brought data. So I don't know if you had a situation like that, and if you did, what to do then?
That's a good one, because I think data, going back to this, is this hype or is this control? I think data can bring value when the answer to that question is hype. But what happens when the real reason that people are making the decision is ego, is control, is that someone feels like they need to be essential to a process? And that is maybe the toughest situation to be in, because now the difficulty becomes, how do you disconnect the idea from the person? Because the person has attached their ego, their career, their need to be essential to the idea. So you have to be very, very careful that what you're talking about is the idea. One of the ways that I've been able to sidestep that is to give away, to plant a different idea, to be able, you've maybe heard of convincing somebody that the idea is their idea. I've been able to do that from time to time with key leaders, where we get into a discussion. I'm able to slide in some alternatives that maybe they hadn't considered and convince them that it's their idea. And so they're able to let go of the one that they were attached to and kind of reattach to a better idea that's actually got the potential to work, because I know how hard it's going to be to build the thing that they're trying to build, or, there's all sorts of reasons why something might fail. It might fail because of market. It might fail because you're not able technically to deliver that solution, or if you can deliver it technically, the lift isn't worth the reward that you're going to get from delivering it. So understanding that, being able to negotiate with and bring your ideas to the table and make it feel like it's a collaboration. I think that's really the path to doing this with another leader is if you make them feel like you're collaborating with them, then they're more likely to embrace the outcome of that collaboration. Whereas if you're pushing an idea onto them, they're more likely to get defensive and push back.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more.
So I think we've probably hit this from as many different angles as we possibly could. Before we wrap up, do you have anything else that you wanted to add?
I think we kind of went into this pretty deep, and I'm really glad that we didn't went onto the surface of the topics. And I would really love to actually hear from our listeners if they could share something with us regarding this.
Yeah. I think here's what we would like to know. What's the most executive-driven feature that you've ever shipped? And did it get real adoption? We've got some real scars here, so we'd love to hear your war stories. Maybe we'll surface some of the better ones in a future episode.
Yeah, and be specific when you send those, because vague ones do not help anybody. We want the feature name, we want the quarter, we want the adoption number. If you can still bring yourself to look at it, no judgment. Consider this as a support group for product managers or anyone that is included in product development and management. So we are looking forward to hear more about your expectations and your experience with this topic. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and we are here monthly, so expect us to see us in 30 days.
Sounds good. I think that's it for today. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you soon. Bye.
See you. Bye.